Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. I got some amazing people with me here again today as we are just digging into the neighborhoods a little bit more here in Indianapolis. Today, we're going to kind of focus north of the downtown. So we're going to go hit up Riverside and then kind of up into Crown Hill, Butler Tarkington, Meridian Kessler, down through Mapleton-Fall Creek, just kind of hit up those areas and through there. So you can kind of get an insight into what's going on when it comes to flipping, retail, wholesale, property management, any of that type of stuff. So I got Randy with me again today. And then, of course, I got Sterling Davis on here and Stacy Patlan. So, Stacy, I think it's your first time on the pod. How's it going?
Good. It's going good. And yes, it is my first time on the pod.
So excited to have you. And I know you and I are planning on doing an episode later on too, because you guys are doing a new build and got some other stuff going on. I feel like Stacy, you're just involved in a bunch of different stuff. So we'll focus on that, all that kind of good stuff a little bit later on an individual episode with you. But I just want to get into some of these neighborhoods right here and let's start with kind of an overview. Stacy, I'll just start with you too, of just like when you're looking at this area, you know, kind of the generalities kind of in this area and stuff like that, when it comes to investing. What are just some of the top things that maybe come to your mind when you're talking to, you know, whether it's out-of-state investors, new investors, anything like that? When you think of these kind of areas, these neighborhoods, what's one of the first things that kind of pops to your mind?
Some of the first things that pop to mind are definitely that these are all street-by-street neighborhoods. You may have a very well-performing street, and then in the next street over, you may have 10 vacant houses. In a lot of these neighborhoods, you still have lower entry points. So if you're someone who's, you know, trying to find something in that $50,000 to like $100,000 purchase price point, you can definitely find something here. But they are mostly older homes, so you sometimes have large rehabs. So low entry point, high cost of rehab, and definitely you need to analyze your deal before you kind of pull the trigger.
Yeah, definitely. I know you hit up my point. Like my first thing I think about are like they're older homes that they're probably going to have basements and things like that. So some of the things, you know, if you're looking for your ranch that's on a slab, no, probably not in this area. You can find it here and there, but for the most part, we're going to have some basements. You're going to have to like kind of, you know, check out those, make sure you do, take care of your scope of work and things like that. So Sterling, how about you? What's just some general things that you think of when you think of these areas when you're coming through here?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's finding where the growth opportunities happen, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think we're all trying to find the next Fountain Square. Like, what are the anchors for these neighborhoods that is going to allow us to grow, as well as like as a buy and hold investor, that I can sustain my asset, right? Like, I can make sure that I put this money in, but it can appreciate as well as I can continuously get good cash flow.
Yeah, awesome, love it. Randy, anything to add to that?
Yeah, like when I'm talking to investors about these areas, I mean, it's really just explaining how a lot of these places have changed a lot over the past, 5 to 10 years. And they're totally different than what they were back then. And they're seeing in some areas a lot of growth and a lot of good things happening. And maybe some people in the past have heard some negative things. So it's really coming to educate them on what's been happening and really kind of showing them kind of the areas on where they should be looking.
Yeah. So let's start off with just the neighborhood of Riverside. That's kind of, Randy, you kind of mentioned of like areas have changed in the last 5 to 10 years. I feel like this area has changed in the last like 6 months, year, 2 years. I feel like every time I go down there, there's something different in things. And honestly, for the most part, it's one of those things I still worry a little bit about kind of the entry point of what I see investors getting in here. I think there are some good things coming in, and I think it is kind of considered an up and coming area. Whether it's gonna be like a Fountain Square or anything, I don't see that coming. But I do think there's some good value there and some things coming in. But I do worry about entry point for some people. So Sterling, let's start with you on this one, just because I know you this is where your first set of rental properties were and things, I believe. So
right.
Getting into Riverside, like what can investors expect? I still consider this kind of a good rental market. You can flip there and flip to homeowners a little bit, but I still consider it a solid rental market. And that's kind of what I think of when I come down here. So let's start with you on this and just Riverside in general and what's going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody knows, right, like this is my neighborhood, right? I love this neighborhood. My grandma's named after School 44, has a place in it and inside of the community center, right? So when I look at Riverside, like the houses I bought 10 years ago, much hasn't changed for those properties, right? Like they're kind of the same right now. than what they were 10 years ago, right? So my rents haven't increased as much, but I'm really excited for what's to come, right? But truthfully, if you know Riverside, like, and the people in the community, that same language has been used for the last 10 years, right? Like, it's like, man, it's so awesome what's to come. But not going too far, but if you look at Riverside, you got to look at the anchor. The anchor 16 Tech, right? Like, that is exciting. But the problem with 16 Tech is it's a transient type of business, right? Like, most people are going there right now, and then they're going back to Westfield to live. So it hasn't yet garnered people to live there on the residential side. So when I start buying my rental properties, I own, one at 2005 East Riverside Drive, and then I know, the one I have at 2017 East Riverside Drive, right? So those, at one point, I wanted to live there, right? Like, but it hasn't got to the point. My wife is not willing to take that leap of faith as of yet, right? So, but as you can see, that 16th Street is kind of that thing. If it's going to start blossoming, it's going to start there, right?
Yeah.
And then Riverside, Park, if you don't know, it's larger than Central Park. So it actually stretches all the way over to IMA. I know we're going to talk about IMA, but what their park's doing when it comes to the master plan, if you don't know, look it up. It started to work, right? They have already started digging for the outside theater. So I think that's really exciting to see because, they're not going to have Shakespeare in the park and people get shot a hole, right? Like, if you have a Shakespeare in the park, like, you got to clean some things up. So, anytime you see kind of growth and development, it's also centered around water. That's why you see the things that's happening in Gary, Indiana. You see all these different things in these other cities. So you almost have to believe that the waterway is going to improve, especially what the city have said so far. So that's why I think Riverside is a great opportunity to invest in and hold at the right entry point. For a buy and hold, like, if you can get it around that 50 to 60,000, I think it's excellent. You're not getting rents, nearing $1,000. That's the thing, right? It's more or less just a holding for, every rental I have. Hardin Street right now is that dividing line for me. Like, if it's west of Hardin Street, it's a different rental property than it's east of Hardin Street. Yeah. So a bunch of my rentals are east of Hardin right now, and all of those are 600 to 650. Okay, so below Hardin Street, I think I have two of them that rent for $750. See, so you can see $100 divide between those two.
Yeah. So, no, really good stuff and really good insight and things. And I feel like what we said too is like that 16 Tech being the catalyst there, and then everything, and then kind of north of that we have everything kind of going around new fields, and they're fixing the parks around there. Everything that's going on Crown Hill, like everything is kind of just consolidating right there in Riverside. And talking about Hardin Street, basically, I feel like that's even expanding. I feel like it's it's going to continue going east a little bit more, and where those rents can kind of improve there. So. Randy, let's kind of jump up into kind of go across from 65 there into like Highland vicinity and Crown Hill. Those areas, I kind of group those together a little bit. Around the Children's Museum, and then kind of up into Crown Hill where the cemetery is. When people are looking at investment properties right there, I think this is like kind of the perfect mix of a little bit of both. You can pick up a pretty good sized rental there that maybe you could do, split into a duplex if it isn't already, or you can do a pretty big flip project, but it's like, are the values there for what you're really going to get it if you're flipping there and stuff like that. Right. So Randy, what are your opinions on just kind of those areas around there?
Yeah. So you could pick up some really, really big houses there, but with that, for the age of the houses comes massive rehabs. I mean, you're talking more than likely full gut jobs. And then when you get to that point, you get to look at those resale values, because a lot of part of Crown Hill isn't quite there yet. I mean, I see a lot of people wanting to flip there, and they're trying to push like a $200,000 ARV. But a lot of Crown Hill is more like 120 to 150. But it is coming around. So when people talk about Crown Hill to me, I'm thinking solid rentals all day long. Yes, you could flip there, but if I'm going to flip there, I'm looking for more of the 1,200 to 1,500 square feet. If I'm getting under that, I don't think I'm going to be able to pull those ARVs that a lot of people are trying to do. So, it's also
there's a lot of dead people over there.
it's also by the cemetery.
You have the quietest neighbors around. So.
Yeah. It's also by the cemetery, and then moving down towards Children's Museum, that area is really coming around too, but still, there are going to be some streets where you're kind of driving around and it's not going to be the best looking street. Just to be honest with you, it's going to be a little rough still. I'm still heavy on that being a good rental neighborhood. Yes, you could flip there, but if it's, again, just make sure your square footage is there to pull those ARVs, and making sure those neighbors are nice.
Yeah.
So can I say something there?
Yeah.
The one thing about Crown Hill that you have to be careful of is government money. So you see a lot of the houses that are been developed on Graceland, for example, it started with government money. So they built a $200,000 house and sold it for $100,000. We can't do that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think you got to be really careful.
Yeah, I see a lot of people there, like that's when they were pushing, there's new builds, and I'm like, oh, it's not really new, like
right, like
let's hit the brakes a little bit.
Yeah, and the values that they're actually selling for, that's not really what they're selling, like that type of thing.
Right.
Yeah, so I look at this area as I always like kind of advise people, like I think this is like the perfect area. It's if I'm buying there right now, I'm going to probably hold it as a rental for maybe like 2 years and see what's going on. But then I think you're going to be able to, then I can go back in later, and if it's turned at that point, then I can do that higher end flip type of thing and stuff like that, because I do think that's a possibility there. It's an interesting area just because there's not like a coffee shop to go to, and you have to like, right. It's just like vertical streets that go up and down, and there's like three main streets over there, and they're houses. That's all that's really there and stuff.
I was asked to locate a grocery store on Illinois, in that area, right? And so I called around for the guy that owned the land. I called the grocery store, and they was like, "Nah, man, we would get robbed. Like, it's got to be a certain wash." And then I think it's like above 10%. They're like, Aldi's was like, yeah, I get that our motto is to be in. We're good.
Yeah. So then, Stacy, if we go across 38th Street there, kind of up into the Tarkington area, and then up into, the Butler area and stuff like that, what are you thinking of that area? I feel like that's, we just talked about Crown Hill, what it is. I think that, that Butler Tarkington area, it's a step above that. And once you get obviously closer to Butler, it's even a little bit better and stuff. This area pretty well and stuff. So what are you thinking about what's going on there? What an investor can inspect and type of stuff?
So my opinion on Butler Tarkington is 38th Street is kind of the dividing line from Crown Hill to Butler Tarkington. I still feel like we need to be at least north of 39, because those houses right there on like between 38 and 39, they're still kind of rough. Like Sterling had said, there's a lot of new builds, but they're like Habitat for Humanity builds and things like that. So it's still kind of rough. We're flipping a new build on 41st and Graceland. I really like Butler Tarkington. My partner Courtney, it took him a while to kind of come around to buying in that area. But there's great rent potential, great, student housing potential, Airbnb potential. And you are able to pull those R's if you're looking to flip. So you may have the same structure of home as Crown Hill, because they're all kind of built in that same time period, but you're able to pull that, 250 to 320 R's. Once you go up closer into more of true Butler Tarkington, which is, really close to Butler campus, I mean, those are $500,000 to, $750,000 houses. And if you're an out-of-state investor and you pull up a map, you will see where the streets are small, and then as the closer you get to Butler, the streets widen and the lot sizes get bigger. So you can totally see the difference in neighborhood within just a quarter-mile radius.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. And just the stuff that's going on, it's kind of like two different areas of where you have and you have a lot of stuff going around Tarkington Park now too, to kind of that lower section where it's always referred to as a little bit lower end versus, around Butler. Butler is that, nicer area and stuff like that. And Tarkington Park was kind of like, I don't know if you really want to be there, but there's some really cool stuff going in there. Even like Brick's Ice Cream that's like located in Broad Ripple. They have like a shop there on the weekends now. And so there's some commerce coming up there and stuff too, which is really neat. But same thing, there's some big houses that you can do some really cool stuff with. Sorry, Stacey, go ahead.
No, and I was going to say, a lot of people are moving towards Butler Tarkington because it's a lower entry point than like South Broad Ripple, even though you're literally 2 miles from Broad Ripple. It's just,
Right.
10 streets over from College Avenue. So people who maybe don't want to spend $400,000 on a bungalow to be in Broad Ripple, they can still easily live in Butler Tarkington. If they're interested in the Red Line is right there. So it's a great place for like first time home buyers who still want to kind of be in an urban and metro area, and then hopefully gain some appreciation while it's developing.
Yeah,
it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy to see though, like, because like it has what Brian talks about though. It has like the coffee shops. It has like one of my friends own, shout out, Curly Coils, which is a natural hair salon, right? Like it kind of has like the chilly waters, right? Like it has the things that make you go, all right. And then what Stacy's saying is it widen streets. One of the things I always see when money starts coming in is like the tree lines. Like it was a crazy statistics. Like most successful people grew up on a house that had tree lines on the streets. Like I didn't grow up on a tree line street, but like on 44th to 59th, you'll see like trees down it. And so that was kind of interesting to look at.
Yeah, it's a really interesting area too, because you have like a complete mix of everything. There are just like straight rental properties there. There's student housing there. There's people that work at Butler that want to live in that area, or there's just families that want to be in that area because they're close to Broad Ripple and close to what's going on around there. So you have a general mix. There's a lot of different stuff that you can do. Something you can pick up is a solid rental property and get some pretty good rents there, or you can flip it and sell it to a family right there, kind of all over it, which is really neat. So some of the kind of the little bit higher end areas, and if we're going into so just north of Butler Tarkington is kind of a little area called Rocky Ripple, kind of along the river there. You can pick up something there as a flip property, is a really really good. I would definitely recommend that. I won't touch on that too much, but kind of Randy, moving over across from Butler Tarkington, and so you go across Meridian Street and you hit up Meridian Kessler. That area around there is just, we can talk about this a little bit for investments. If you can find any property there, just pick it up for whatever you want to do and good luck.
Basically. Right? Yeah. So Meridian Kessler kind of stretches, like it's pretty long, but it's still another area kind of like Butler Tarkington where you get closer to 38th Street. Things are a little different, better now than it was about, 5 to 6 years ago. I remember looking at flips that were like on 39th Street and what was it? Like Guilford. Those things sat on the market forever just because the activity wasn't there yet. So people were trying to move in. But now you pick up properties, 39th and up, just kind of like I said, Butler Tarkington, pick it up because it's, values are there now, activities there. And for the most part, you could flip anything there.
Yeah, that's an area like Meridian Kessler, and I used to teach, kind of right down around here, so I'd drive through there every time. And I've been in Indianapolis for 7 years now, but I feel like it's one of the areas that I've seen a big difference in. And just like there were nice homes there always has been, but just what they've done with those nice homes are pretty cool. Like just the landscaping they've done to them, or just the new, they got the bright colors and like kind of the newer stuff that you see on the HGTVs and stuff like that. That's what this area is all about. If you're in Indianapolis and checking things out, I would definitely recommend driving through this area just to see what's going on, because what that area looks like now, it didn't look like that 7 years ago when I moved out here. But what we're seeing there right now is kind of expanding out into these other areas like the Butler Tarkington and even down into the Crown Hill a little bit and Watson McCord and stuff like that. Those are still up and coming, and those are still a little bit rougher areas. But, as that Meridian Kessler kind of expands and they do some stuff with, you're going to kind of see it in these other areas as well. So Sterling, as far as like the Watson McCord area, if we come back south of 38th Street now, kind of into that Watson McCord area, this is kind of an area I feel like people have some mixed feelings about, and just I feel like some people have gotten some bad advice about a little bit. Bad advice is maybe the wrong way to say it, but I feel like people expect a little bit more in this area than what it really is. It's one of those areas I think I'll speak to the out-of-state investors here. If you're an out-of-state investor and you hear about Watson McCord and you see what's going on there, you think one thing. When you go visit it, you're like, nope, I don't want to get out of my car a little bit here. So what are you seeing there as far as kind of rent values and what's going on there?
No, I think you hit it on the head right there, right? Like, it's too many times have I got properties that we're managing and they're like, well, I need to get $1,200 in rent. And it's like, that seems like a ceiling right now for Watson McCord, right? Like getting above $1,000 in rent per side. And we're talking mostly like a lot of those are big houses as well as duplexes over there, right? So it's a lot of good value as well as apartments over there. You know, it's one apartment in particular. I feel like it's keep changing hands, and a new investor gets it like, you want to manage it? Like, and if anybody listens, they probably know which one, right? So, but what we see is kind of a ceiling right now. Like, I think if maybe you can flip a little bit, but really, like what we talked about before, we got to figure out what's going to happen with 38th Street. Like, I mean, that's kind of the elephant in the room here. Like we try to build these neighborhoods, and then we're like, well, it's a crackhead on 38th Street right now, and I got to get around him before I get to Watson McCord, right? So that's kind of the feeling, right? Like you see these nice houses developing, and then you do these rentals and things, but it's still like 38th Street's right there, though. Like, you know, so that's kind of my feeling. Like, be careful when you're trying to get above $1,000 in rent. Like, I think, you know, we have a couple of investors that's right at 1,000 at 1,100 per side when it comes to it. And those was really hard because they were told they were probably getting 1,400 in rent.
Yeah, it's one of those areas I think that, like, honestly, if you might be able to get 1,200 and that's awesome, but honestly, that's great. Go for it.
Right.
But I don't know if you'll get it when you rent it again, like after a year.
Right.
If they move out, like, I don't know if you'll be able to get it again. It's kind of in that realm. It's possible and stuff, but it all depends on who's moving in there and what they're comfortable with and what they want to do and stuff. So maybe you can get somebody that just wants to be close enough to, you know, the Sobro and things like that, but not necessarily pay those prices. So maybe you can get them in there, and it's kind of up in the air. I think it can go one way or the other right now with that area in there. So kind of moving down in that Mapleton-Fall Creek area, then, you know, this is an interesting area, I think, where it's just like there's a mix of rental properties, flip properties, and just like large apartments and things in through there. So Stacy, I don't know if you've done any project, if you and Courtney have done any projects in through there or anything, but what are some insights that you have on just that Mapleton-Fall Creek area and stuff? I feel like when I started in real estate, you know, with Simple, like 4 years ago, that's like all you heard is like, oh, Mapleton-Fall Creek, like I want to be there, I want to flip there. That's where you hear all the wholesale properties were, and I'm like, it's okay, like it's nothing special, but yeah, there's some projects there, some cool things going on, but I don't know if it like lived up to the hype even like 4 years ago, and I don't know if it's got there yet either.
No, and you know, it's one of those neighborhoods that it really is street by street, and you kind of have to check out who your neighbors are. You know, you might be able to find a decent flip, and there's a few that have been developed on that street, but if you've got 3 ran down duplexes next to you, it's really going to kind of affect your sellability. We have not flipped over there in that neighborhood, mostly because, you know, I feel like some of the deals that come out, they market them a little bit too high for what we would like to make. And some people, you know, use that neighborhood name on houses that aren't in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's a lot of stuff coming. There's some really nice houses, some really nice flips. I drove down there, I think it was like a year ago, and I was like, ooh, this street did not look like this 3 years ago. So definitely one that I would be willing to flip it for sure. It's just finding that right deal and that right price point coming in.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can get something along Fall Creek and stuff like that. Like, yeah, that's probably going to look pretty good and pretty cool, but then it's still literally like, okay, when you get into it,
yeah, things going to change.
Yeah. And then even on the other side is kind of the same thing. On the other side of Fall Creek, you have Fall Creek Place and, you know, Reagan Park and things like that, which are really nice. But then you still have that, like, you know, Friends and Neighbors, which is kind of like, that's been my like nemesis for the last couple of years of neighborhoods. Of like, oh man, this project ended up great, or this project, oh, what happened? I overanalyzed, you know, that kind of thing. So I feel like it's kind of the same thing in Mapleton-Fall Creek a little bit. But also there are some, like we've done a couple small apartment flips to some people and wholesale some small apartments over there and stuff, and they've turned out great and they're doing really well right now. Some people, so there's some of that. There's a little bit larger apartments you can do, you know, up to the, you know, the 30 unit, 40 units and stuff like that. But then there's also mixed in like some little 10 units and 12 units and things like that. So, but then you also, you know, have the flip opportunities and things in there as well. So Sterling, as far as like rents go in that area, like what can people expect if they're looking at maybe, you know, single family versus multifamily in that area?
Yeah, I mean, your rents are like, it's so funny. Like this neighborhood has improved so much over the years, right? Like I had a house that I owned at 30th in New Jersey, and the rents were, you know, $800, and that was 5-7 years ago as a single family. Now that house is $1,000 plus rental property. But you have to be careful though on the multifamily, because you got a lot of 1-1s over there. Like, we were asked to manage several properties over there, and they're 1-1. So that does change the value drastically, right? So understanding who those people are. But historically, as a traditional house or duplex, we're getting anywhere from $850 to $1,000. Pretty solid, just depending on the price, the presentation, and things. So just beware of personally, I hate 1-1s, like, because it's just not enough single people with a dog that just wants to live in Indiana, right?
Yeah. So the people the people that want the 1-1s are going to be the one. They want the ones. That's the areas that they want to be able to walk to the coffee shop and want to be able to kind of do that. You gotta go a little bit further north to be able to do that here, or a little bit farther south. You're kind of like right in the middle of all that stuff. So it's a really good point, Sterling. So as we kind of wrap up this episode here with talking about Riverside up into like Crown Hill and Butler Tarkington and Meridian Kessler down in Mapleton-Fall Creek and all the areas, all the little small areas in between there and stuff like that too. Randy, any little like just last thoughts on anything for that, or any insights for the investors out there?
Yeah, I think all the places we talked about, at least for the ones south of 38th Street, those are pretty easier to kind of navigate. I'm sorry, let me reverse. The ones north of 38th Street are a little easier to navigate. When you get south of 38th Street, that's when you should do your homework and, trust your advisors that are, kind of looking at these properties for you if you're not here in town. Because like those areas in Riverside, those areas in Crown Hill that we talked about, you really want to make sure you drive the street for the property you're looking at, because that's going to kind of be a decision maker for you. But overall, all those neighborhoods we talked about, I think, are on my list of where all investors should look for opportunities. I'm fans of all of them. So, it's something I definitely would love to get more deals in, because I think they're great opportunities for investments.
Yeah, I mean, there's all these neighborhoods we mentioned today. I would not like. There's not one that I want to invest in.
There's no red flags on this list for me.
Yeah. So, Stacy, how about you? Any last thoughts for today?
Yeah. So, touching on what Randy kind of spoke on. So, when you're south of 38th Street, I did want to mention that Regions has a portfolio loan within their program, and it's promoting home ownership. So it's a 100% finance conventional loan. And this is for homeowners, so it doesn't really help the investor, but it gives them something to help market their property. Yeah. And it helps that there's a local bank putting money into the neighborhood. And then Huntington has a investor loan. So for like refi purchase, it is a 20% down conventional, but they do pay all of your closing costs, and they have a couple other perks within it. So Regions in Huntington, they are dumping money in these neighborhoods. So definitely, if you don't have a lender, reach out to one and just kind of ask them about them, because I know we all network off each other, and we all use kind of a few of the same people, but it's okay to reach out to other people to see if there's new opportunities.
Yeah. Great tip. I really like that, especially if you're flipping properties there, your homeowner needs some help. You need help being able to sell and things like that. There's some really good opportunities there. Awesome stuff, Stacy. Sterling, how about you? Last thoughts for today?
Yeah, I think people just need to analyze the deal, right? A lot of the places that we talked about are really good, but they kind of fringe on the idea of might be better flip opportunities. What I mean by that is the ARV are starting to push up in these Mapleton-Fall Creeks, that area, all those different things that people just expect because the ARV is creeping up that I can do a 1%. And that's not necessarily the case. And that's where people kind of get stuck in deals where they assume that the rents are going to be in line with the ARVs. And that's not the case. And traditionally, that's not the case even in Indianapolis. Traditionally, like Indianapolis home ownership is like 150, 175 or something like that on average, and average rent's 900, right? So that's not good when it comes to buy and hold. But there are pockets in which that you can do that. And that's why we try to find new territory that we can get a lower entry point and build and grow with the neighborhood. And that's why the Riversides are really good for it. Even parts of Martindale, Brightwood, like find those new areas that you can come in at a lower entry point, because you're kind of getting priced out when it comes to Mapleton-Fall Creek, the McCord, like those places. So just be careful.
Yeah. So really good stuff today, guys. One of my final thoughts on just these areas is one of my favorite things to kind of watch is what's going on with the parks there. What they're looking to do in Riverside Park and kind of what they're kind of expecting to put in there. But then just even north of 38th Street or right around Newfields with Virginia A Fairbanks Park, the money they put into there and like how nice it is. There's a lot of people that are going down on the weekends. I went down there a couple of weekends ago and it was like I couldn't park it. It was just full. So there's a lot of people that like from local people that are going there into these areas to hang out in some of the parks and to do stuff down in these areas now, which I don't think was the case, 4 or 5 years ago even too. So they're starting to be more attractive, starting to do some cool things down in there. And really excited to see what happens. So really appreciate you three. Thank you so much for joining me today. And if you guys have any questions or anything like that, definitely hit us up. Let us know if we can help you out in any way. You can hit me up at brian@simplewholesaling.com, Randy at simplewholesaling.com as well. Stacy, what's some contact information for you if somebody wants to reach out to you or has more questions?
Yeah, I am a licensed agent, so my email is stacy@frontporchre.com, or you can give me a call. So I can just pretty much give them my name. All my contact information is on the Google page.
Awesome. Sterling?
Yep. Ethosty Property Management. You can find us at ethostymanagement.com, ETHOSITY management.com. Yeah, all my information's on there.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot. Hopefully this episode helped you out. Let us know if we can do anything for you if you have any questions. And with that, that's a wrap for this episode of the Indy Investor Pod, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.